I'm Mark Mitchell, I'm 34 years old, and at my own brother's promotion party, my entire family called me a worthless failure to my face. Before I tell you how a single sentence I spoke made his company's CTO gasp and my brother's jaw hit the floor, let me know where you're all watching from in the comments down below. The drive to Willow Creek always felt like traveling back in time, and not in a good way. The moment my tires left the smooth asphalt of the interstate and hit the cracked, uneven pavement of the county highway, a familiar tension began to coil in my stomach. The city skyline vanished from my rearview mirror, replaced by endless fields of corn and the occasional rusted-out silo. Each passing landmark was a ghost from my past. The old water tower where I'd had my first kiss, the rickety bridge over the creek where my brother Alex and I used to fish, the town square that hadn't changed in 50 years. It was a journey not just through space, but through layers of my own history, most of which I had tried very hard to forget. My 5-year-old sedan, a reliable but utterly unremarkable vehicle, felt like a perfect metaphor for how my family saw me. As I pulled into the packed parking lot of the Willow Creek Community Center, I saw the evidence all around me. Gleaming new SUVs and German luxury cars, the unofficial uniform of suburban success, were parked in every prime spot. I found a space in the back, next to the dumpsters, feeling like I was already being relegated to the sidelines. I killed the engine and just sat there for a minute, the silence of the car a stark contrast to the muffled beat of party music I could hear from the building. Across the entrance, a vinyl banner, hastily hung and already sagging in the middle, flapped in the breeze. The letters were a garish blue and gold. Congratulations, Regional Manager Alex Mitchell. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of exhaust fumes and cut grass. It wasn't jealousy that I felt, not exactly. It was a profound and weary sense of alienation, the feeling of being a foreigner in my own hometown, an actor who had forgotten his lines in a play he never wanted to be in. Stepping inside was like diving into a pool of lukewarm water. The air was thick with the smell of catered food, cheap perfume, and a kind of forced, high-pitched cheerfulness. The noise was overwhelming, a dozen different conversations competing with a playlist of 80s rock hits. I felt my shoulders tense up, my social anxiety, usually dormant in my structured city life, flaring up like a bad allergy. My cousin, Rachel, a woman who seemed to be in a perpetual state of frazzled motion, spotted me first. She was trying to prevent one of her 3 young sons from pulling down a decorative plant. "Mark, my God, I can't believe you actually showed up," she exclaimed, her voice a little too loud, drawing a few curious glances. It wasn't a warm welcome. It was an expression of genuine shock, as if she'd seen a ghost. "You're so lucky you can just float in and out like this. Try leaving the house with these little demons attached to your leg for a day. You wouldn't last an hour." I just managed a tight nod, unsure of what to say. Before I could formulate a response, my mother, Eleanor, descended upon me. She was in her element, a general commanding her troops, directing caterers and adjusting flower arrangements with a sharp eye. She saw me and her face broke into a practiced, brittle smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her hug was brief and bony, all sharp angles and the faint chemical scent of expensive hairspray. She pulled back, and her eyes immediately did a swift, critical inventory of my appearance. My clean but simple jeans, my dark, well-fitting but unremarkable button-down shirt. "Mark, you're here," she said, a hint of relief in her tone that quickly curdled into criticism. "You could have worn a tie. Alex's colleagues are here. His boss is here. It's important to make a good impression. This is a very important day for him." There it was. Not, "How have you been, son?" Not, "The drive was okay?" But a gentle yet firm correction. A reminder that I had, once again, failed to understand the assignment. Just as I was about to be swallowed whole by the familiar feeling of inadequacy, a warm hand landed on my arm. I turned to see my Aunt Patricia, my dad's older sister. She was a calm island in my family's turbulent sea, a woman whose kindness was as deep and quiet as her grief. Her eyes, unlike my mother's, were kind and searching. They didn't just register my presence. They seemed to see the fatigue and the tension coiled behind my polite mask. "You look tired, city boy," she murmured, her voice a low, comforting hum just for me. She squeezed my arm, a gesture of solidarity. "But there's a sturdiness in your eyes I haven't seen before. A new kind of quiet. Don't let them get to you tonight." I gave her the first genuine, if small, smile of the day. Her words were a lifeline, a validation that I wasn't imagining the undercurrents in the room. I was grateful for her more than she knew. At that moment, I had no idea just how much I was going to need that quiet sturdiness she saw in me. The party was just getting started, and the main event, the one where I was the star exhibit of failure, hadn't even begun. In an attempt to avoid any more immediate family interrogations, I mumbled an excuse about needing a drink and made a beeline for the relative safety of the snack table. Grabbing a plastic cup of watery iced tea, I tried to make myself as inconspicuous as possible, hoping to blend into the floral wallpaper until I had served my obligatory sentence and could slip out unnoticed. It was a futile hope, a voice from my past, a voice I genuinely was happy to hear, found me. "Mark Mitchell? Is that really you under that city grit?" I turned to see Dr. Henry Simmons, my old computer science teacher from Willow Creek High. He was grayer now, almost completely white, in fact, and his face was a roadmap of friendly wrinkles earned from a lifetime of smiling at confused teenagers. But his eyes, behind a pair of thick-rimmed glasses, still had the same energetic, intelligent spark I remembered so well. He was the only teacher who hadn't looked at my adolescent obsession with coding as a weird, antisocial hobby. He'd seen it for what it was, a language, a form of art, a way of building worlds. "Dr. Simmons?" I said, a real, unforced smile spreading across my face as I shook his outstretched hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "It's great to see you. I didn't know you'd be here." "Are you kidding? Your brother Alex was one of my students too," he chuckled. "A bit of a C+ student in my class, if I recall. More interested in football than Fortran. But his mother sends me a Christmas card every year without fail." He leaned in a bit, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "But you, Mark, you were the real deal. I always told the other teachers, that Mitchell boy, the quiet one, he sees the world in a different architecture. I trust you're still tinkering with those wild, world-changing ideas you used to sketch out on my whiteboards instead of taking notes." "Something like that." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "You were the one who taught me that the most valuable problems to solve are the ones most people don't even know they have yet. That stuck with me." "And was I right?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with genuine interest. "You were dead on," I confirmed. "I still have that worn-out copy of the Mythical Man Month you gave me after I spent a month trying to build a new operating system from scratch. It's sitting on my desk right now, a constant reminder not to get too ambitious." His smile widened into a proud grin. "I knew it. I knew you had it in you. So, what is this mysterious technology company you're running in Chicago? The alumni newsletter is always so vague." Talking to him was like finding an oasis in a desert of misunderstanding. He was a link to a time when my passion was seen as a gift, not a character flaw. He was a direct line back to the only other person who ever truly championed my cause. My dad. My dad was a man of numbers and ledgers, the respected branch manager at the First National Bank of Willow Creek, a pillar of the community. He was as practical and grounded as they come, but he possessed a quiet, deep-seated curiosity that my mother and brother utterly lacked. He didn't understand what I was doing when I'd spend entire weekends dismantling our family computer and trying to put it back together. But he understood the intense, focused fire in my eyes. I'll never forget one evening. I was about 16, hunched over the keyboard in my room, so frustrated I was close to tears. I was trying to write a piece of code that was just beyond my grasp. My dad came in and just stood there for a minute, watching me, the green text scrolling endlessly on the black screen. He didn't say, "You should be outside," or "Are you done with your homework?" Instead, he said something I've never forgotten. "It's like building a cathedral, isn't it?" I looked up, completely baffled. "What? A cathedral?" he repeated, his voice a low, thoughtful rumble. "You're laying every single brick, one by one, thousands of them. And to everyone else, it just looks like a messy construction site, a pile of bricks and dust. But you can see the whole thing in your head. The spires, the arches, the stained glass windows. You're the only one who knows what it's going to become. He put a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. Don't ever let anyone tell you your cathedral is just a pile of bricks, son. They just don't have the eyes to see it. He died of a massive heart attack 7 years ago, the year I graduated from college. And with his passing, my cathedral felt like it had lost its foundation, its chief architect. The week after the funeral was a suffocating blur of well-meaning neighbors, casseroles, and quiet, weeping relatives. But beneath the grief, there was an immense, unspoken pressure building, all of it directed at me. The sensible path had been laid out for me. A very generous job offer from Wilson Financial, the largest and most prestigious investment firm in town. The same place Alex was already charming his way up the corporate ladder. It was the safe, respectable, Alex-like path. Everyone expected me to take it. I found my mother in the living room a few days later. She was sorting through some of my dad's old neckties, her movements slow and sad. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "Mom," I began, my voice unsteady. "I need to tell you something. I'm not going to take the job at Wilson's." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, her expression guarded. "What are you talking about? It's a wonderful opportunity." "I know," I said, forging on before I lost my nerve. "But I'm moving to Chicago. I have an idea for a software company. It's a new way to analyze financial data using predictive algorithms. Could change everything. It's a risk, but Dad always said, 'Don't you bring your father into this?'" She snapped, her grief suddenly turning sharp and angry. "Your father is gone. This is not the time for your childish fantasies and your computer games. We need you to be responsible, to be practical, to be here." "Why? For the love of God, can't you just be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like your brother?" That question became the defining question of my life, the ghost that haunted every decision I made. The years that followed were brutal. They were a montage of tiny, cramped apartments, mountains of takeout containers, 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee, and the constant, gnawing fear of absolute failure. But then a breakthrough. My little company, the one I'd named Quantum Solutions in a fit of youthful, optimistic ambition, secured its first round of seed funding. It was $250,000. To me, after years of living on fumes, it felt like all the money in the world. It was proof. It was real. It meant I wasn't crazy. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the number. My heart was pounding, a wild drum of excitement and a desperate, childish need for approval. "Mom! Hey, Mom! It's me. I have the most amazing news," I shouted into the receiver, pacing the length of my tiny apartment. "My company, Quantum Solutions? We just got our first big investment. It's happening. It's really happening." There was a beat of static-filled silence on the other end of the line. "Oh," she said finally. Her voice was flat, distant, like I was telling her about a change in the weather. "Quantum Solutions. That's nice, dear." And then, without a single follow-up question, the pivot came. It was as swift and brutal as a guillotine. "That reminds me, I have some exciting news too. Alex just got named associate manager of his department. He got a small raise and a designated parking spot right near the entrance. Can you believe it? We're all so incredibly proud of him. He's on a real career path, you know?" The elation drained out of me instantly, replaced by a cold, heavy emptiness that settled deep in my bones. I had just handed her my dream, a dream I had bled for, and she had brushed it aside to talk about a parking spot. She didn't ask what my company did. She didn't ask who the investors were. She didn't ask what it meant for my future. She just changed the channel back to the Alex show, the only program she was interested in watching. I mumbled a hollow congratulations and ended the call. Sitting in the echoing silence of my apartment, I felt a profound sense of foolishness. The validation I had craved from her was a mirage in a desert I was starting to realize I might never escape. But hope is a stubborn, stupid thing. I tried one last time about a year after that. We had a major breakthrough with our core algorithm, and a prestigious, albeit niche, tech journal did a full feature on us. It was a technical piece, full of jargon she wouldn't understand, but it was a milestone. It was tangible proof. I emailed the link to her and to Alex. My subject line was simple, hopeful, some exciting news I wanted to share. My mom's reply never came. Alex's arrived within 5 minutes. His entire response was a masterclass in the casual, dismissive cruelty he had perfected over a lifetime. TLDR, bro, he wrote. Seriously, who has time to read all that nerd stuff? Looks like you're getting good at spending other people's money. Just try not to go bankrupt, okay? Mom's worried enough as it is. Too long. Didn't read. He hadn't just ignored my achievement. He had mocked it, weaponized our mother's worry, and dismissed my life's work as a frivolous waste of time. That was the final straw. That was the day I stopped trying. That was the day I went dark. I built a wall around my professional life, and I never let them see over it again. I let them live in their comfortable, self-constructed reality where Alex was the sun, the moon, and all the stars, and I was a distant, cold, and failing planet. It hurt, but it hurt less than constantly extending a hand only to have it slapped away with a smirk. Earth to Mark? You still with us, man? I blinked, yanked back to the loud, bright present of the party. It was Jason Wilson, Alex's best friend and corporate mini-me since high school. He was snapping his fingers an inch from my face, a smug, familiar grin plastered on his. Wow, you really zone out, huh? He laughed, taking a loud swig of his beer. Daydreaming about a real job with a 401k. I'm just busting your chops, man. He leaned in, his breath smelling of stale beer and arrogance. But seriously, you should see Alex at the office. He's a shark, a natural-born leader. While you've been off in Chicago playing with your little, what do you call it again? Your quantum thingy. He's been building a real empire. I just looked at him, at his perfectly coiffed hair and his shiny, expensive watch. The echo of his words was perfect. The condescending tone, the deliberate dismissal of my life's work as a thingy. He was a perfect parrot, squawking the opinions my family had fed him for years. And as I glanced across the room, my stomach churned as I saw Alex watching us, a look of satisfied approval on his face. He was proud of his boy, his loyal attack dog, for reminding his weirdo brother of his place in the family hierarchy. It was then, in that moment, that the final, painful piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just ignorance. It wasn't just a lack of interest. It was a carefully constructed, willfully maintained reality. They didn't know about my life because they had actively chosen not to know. They had written the story of Mark the failure years ago, and they weren't interested in any new chapters, any new evidence that might contradict the original manuscript. Because if they were wrong about me, what else in their perfect, well-ordered world might they be wrong about? And that was a thought too terrifying, too disruptive, for them to ever even consider. Just as Jason Wilson was about to launch into another story about Alex's brilliance, the energy in the room shifted. A wave of applause, much louder and more enthusiastic this time, erupted from the entrance. It was a ripple of sycophantic energy that spread through the crowd. The guest of honor, my brother Alex, had made his grand entrance. He walked in with the unearned confidence of a king returning to his court after a victorious battle. His arm was possessively draped around his pregnant wife, Emma, who looked up at him with an expression of pure adoration. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking suit, a deep charcoal gray that probably cost more than my first car, his hair perfectly coiffed with just the right amount of product. He was a living, breathing portrait of conventional, suburban success, and he was drinking in the applause, the handshakes, the pats on the back, like a plant soaking in the sun after a long drought. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept the room, taking a silent inventory of who was there, who was paying attention, who was sufficiently impressed. When his gaze landed on me, standing awkwardly by the wilted vegetable platter, His grin widened into something that wasn't entirely friendly. It was sharp and predatory. He changed his course, leaving a small group of admirers mid-sentence, and strode directly toward me. His small entourage of work friends, all younger, eager to please versions of himself, trailed in his wake like pilot fish following a shark. He clapped me hard on the back, a gesture that was less a fraternal greeting and more a physical assertion of dominance. It was hard enough to make me stumble a step forward, sloshing my iced tea onto my hand. "Mark, my big brother," he boomed, his voice resonating with forced bonhomie, loud enough for everyone within a 10-foot radius to turn and look. "I honestly didn't think you'd make it. Did you get lost on your way out of your basement workshop in the big city?" His friends, his loyal chorus, chuckled obediently. Emma, who had glided up beside him, gave a little laugh and laid a perfectly manicured hand on his chest. "Oh, Alex, be nice to your brother," she chided. But her eyes were dancing with the same cruel amusement. They were a perfectly matched pair, a team, thriving on the same cheap currency of public validation and private mockery. "I'm just saying," Alex continued, his eyes doing a slow, theatrical scan of my outfit, from my simple leather shoes to my button-down shirt. He made a show of looking at his own gleaming Italian loafers. "Look at this guy. He comes to his brother's promotion party looking like he's about to mow the lawn. Still can't afford a suit. Bro, are times that tough up there?" For the next hour, this became the running theme of the evening. I wasn't a guest. I was a prop in Alex's one-man show. I was a walking, talking embodiment of the wrong path taken, the life gone sideways. The attacks were relentless. A death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one disguised as a joke or a piece of friendly, concerned advice, which only made them sting more. It was a coordinated, multifaceted assault on my life choices, and the entire party seemed to be in on it. My Uncle George, a man whose greatest life achievement was correctly predicting the winner of the Super Bowl 3 years in a row, cornered me by the bathrooms. He draped a heavy, unwelcome arm over my shoulder, his breath smelling faintly of whiskey. "Mark, my boy," he said, shaking his head with a sigh of profound disappointment. "I'm worried about you. A man your age, no wife, no kids, no stable career path with a pension. It's just not natural. You need to put down roots, son. Look at your brother. He's got it all figured out. A real company, a real future. He's secure." He patted my shoulder again, a gesture of profound pity that made my skin crawl. "It's never too late to get on the right track, you know? Swallow that pride." Later, as I was trying to get a glass of water, desperately trying to find a quiet corner, Mrs. Winters, our nosy former neighbor whose curtains were a legendary source of neighborhood surveillance, intercepted me. She grabbed my hand with her frail, bird-like claws, her rings digging into my skin. "Oh, Mark, dearie," she sighed, her voice a reedy, penetrating whisper that could cut through concrete. "You were always such a smart boy, such a whiz with those computers. What happened? Your father, God rest his soul, he was a branch manager at the bank by the time he was 30. You have to think about your future, dear. You're not getting any younger. A nice girl isn't going to want a man with no prospects." Every conversation was a trap, a dead end. Every piece of advice was a veiled insult, a public judgment. I was trapped in a funhouse of their collective disapproval, where every mirror reflected a distorted, failed version of myself. I just nodded, smiled a tight, painful smile, and let the words pile up inside me. Each one was a small, sharp stone, and they were building a mountain of resentment in my gut that was growing heavier and more unstable by the minute. The main event, of course, was the speeches. My mother, beaming with a pride so intense it was almost painful to look at, tapped a water glass with a spoon, and a hush fell over the room. Alex took the small, makeshift stage, standing directly in front of the banner that bore his name. He was in his element, a conquering hero addressing his adoring subjects. He started with the usual thank yous, his voice smooth and polished, a practiced performance of humility. He thanked his wonderful colleagues at Wilson Financial for being the best damn team a guy could ask for. He thanked his beautiful, incredible, supportive wife for being his rock. And then his eyes scanned the crowd and found me. A cruel, triumphant smirk played on his lips. He raised his glass of champagne. And I'd like to give a very special, a very heartfelt thank you to my big brother, Mark, he announced, his voice dripping with a condescending magnanimity that made my stomach turn. He flew all the way from Chicago to be here tonight, and I think that's great. It's really, really important for him to see what a real career, what real, tangible success actually looks like. A wave of laughter, louder this time, rippled through the room. It wasn't overtly hostile laughter. It was the easy, comfortable laughter of a crowd that's in on the joke. The lovable, successful son gently ribbing his eccentric, struggling older brother. It was a familiar story, a comfortable narrative for them all to settle into. And I was the punchline. My face felt like it was carved from stone. My blood was roaring in my ears. I could feel the weight of their collective pity, a physical thing, pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to shatter the smug, self-satisfied atmosphere of the room. I wanted to tell them they had no idea what they were talking about, that their definition of success was a pathetic, narrow prison. But I was paralyzed. The years of being silenced, of being told my reality was wrong, had done their work. I just stood there and took it, a silent monument to their ignorance and my own cowardice. When the applause for his speech finally died down, I made a move for the exit, thinking the public flogging was finally over. I was wrong. The grand finale was a private performance, which, of course, made it all the more brutal. My mother and Alex intercepted me in the hallway, away from the prying eyes of the party guests. It was an ambush disguised as a loving intervention. "Mark, we need to talk," my mother began, her face a mask of practiced, earnest concern. "We are so worried about you. You see your brother? You see what he's accomplished? He's a regional manager. He's buying a bigger house for his growing family. He has a future, a real one." I said nothing. My silence seemed to infuriate her, to confirm her worst fears about my stubbornness. "If you had just listened to us," she said, her voice gaining a sharp, accusatory edge that cut through her concerned facade. "If you had just taken that sensible job at Wilson's all those years ago, you could have had something too. You could have been successful. Instead, you threw it all away to chase these childish technological illusions." Alex stepped forward then, draping his arm over my shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of ownership, of pity, the way a king might condescend to a court jester. "She's right, man," he said, his voice low and confidential, as if sharing a sad, undeniable secret. "Just look at you, then look at me. It's been years, and you're still just a nobody with a little startup that's going nowhere. Just face it. It's over. You failed. A nobody. That was the word. The final nail. The period at the end of a long, cruel sentence. The summation of my entire existence in their eyes. All the 100-hour weeks, all the terrifying risks, all the sacrifices, all the moments of terror and triumph that had defined my adult life. All of it erased, boiled down to that one single crushing word. And that's when it happened. Something inside me, a core part of my identity that I had kept locked away and protected for years, the part that still remembered my father's words about building cathedrals, finally snapped. The part of me that always sought peace, that always made excuses for them, that always absorbed the blows, it just disintegrated, turned to dust. The polite, strained smile on my face didn't change, but a profound shift happened within me. It was the feeling of a tectonic plate, grinding under immense pressure for decades, finally giving way in a great, silent, world-altering earthquake. A cold, diamond-hard calm settled over me. The hurt was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a terrifying, absolute clarity. I looked at my mother's disappointed, pitying face. I looked at my brother's smug, condescending one. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my very soul, that I was done. I was done being their footnote. I was done being their cautionary tale. I was done being their nobody. I shrugged his heavy, patronizing arm off my shoulder. My voice, when it finally came, was quiet, devoid of all emotion. It was the calmest and most dangerous I had sounded all night. "I think," I said, looking directly into my brother's startled eyes. "That's enough." The 3 words, spoken so quietly, had the force of a physical blow. They hung in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway air like a blade. Alex's smug, pitying expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. He was a bully, and bullies are creatures of habit, reliant on predictable reactions. He was used to me flinching, looking down at my shoes, offering a mumbled, half-hearted defense that he could easily swat aside. He was not prepared for this unnerving stillness, this direct, unbroken eye contact. It was like he had pushed against a door he had pushed open 1,000 times before, only to find it was now a solid wall of granite. My mother opened her mouth, her lips already forming the beginning of another well-worn lecture about my wasted potential and my stubborn pride. But I didn't give her the chance. I turned my back on them both, a simple act of physical disengagement that felt more powerful than any argument I could have made. I walked away. It wasn't a retreat. It was an advance. I walked back into the main room of the party, but my entire perspective had been fundamentally and irrevocably altered. The room no longer felt like a hostile environment. It felt like a stage, and the tired, tragic play that had been running for years, with me in the starring role of the family failure, was about to have a very unexpected final act, directed by me. The low hum of chatter, the clinking of glasses, the bad party music that was making my teeth ache, it all faded into a distant, irrelevant buzz. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of hurt and resentment just moments before, was now preternaturally clear, focused with the intensity of a laser. For my entire life, I had played the role they had so generously assigned me. Mark the dreamer, Mark the eccentric, Mark the failure. I had accepted their narrative, had allowed them to define me because on some deep subconscious level, I believed that was my price of admission into the family. I thought that keeping the peace, even at the cost of my own self-respect, was what a good son and a good brother was supposed to do. But I saw now, with a clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that their version of peace was a suffocating blanket, a weighted shroud designed to smother any spark, any ambition, that didn't fit their narrow, pre-approved mold. It wasn't peace, it was control. And my days of being controlled were over. My eyes swept the room, no longer with the aimless, avoidant gaze of a reluctant guest, but with the sharp, assessing focus of a predator that has just spotted its prey. I was looking for a specific person, and then, through the throng of glad-handing salesmen and their smiling wives, I saw her, Victoria Chin, the Chief Technology Officer of Wilson Financial's multinational parent corporation. She was a legend in the tech finance world, a name I knew from industry journals and conference speaker lists. I'd seen her deliver a keynote speech at a conference in San Francisco last year. She was sharp, incisive, and one of the few old-guard executives who truly understood the seismic, world-altering shift that technology was bringing to their industry. She was standing near the bar, nursing a club soda with a slice of lime, looking impeccably polished, professionally composed, and profoundly bored. She was clearly here out of corporate obligation, a high-ranking emissary sent from the imperial capital to bless the promotion of a promising provincial manager. As I began to walk towards her, my path a straight, undeviating line through the crowd, a hand clamped down hard on my arm. It was Alex, his face a mask of irritation and rising panic. My abrupt departure and my new, purposeful demeanor had clearly thrown him off script. He was losing control of the situation. "Hey, where the hell do you think you're going?" he hissed, his voice a low, urgent whisper that was tight with frustration. "Don't you dare go and make a scene, Mark. Don't you dare embarrass me in front of these people." I swear to God, I didn't even glance at him. I just kept walking, my pace steady, forcing him to either let go or be dragged along with me like a petulant child. He chose the latter, stumbling into a clumsy half-step beside me, his grip still painfully tight on my bicep. "I'm serious, man. What is wrong with you tonight?" he pressed, his voice a strained whisper. He was desperate to reassert his dominance, to shove me back into the comfortable little box he'd built for me. And so, he defaulted to his favorite, most reliable tool. His own success held up as a mirror to my supposed failure. "Look, I get it, you're having a tough time, you're feeling sensitive," he said, trying to adopt a tone of brotherly concern that was laughably false. "But you need to get a grip. I'm making real moves here. Big moves." He puffed out his chest, a pathetic display of insecurity that was suddenly painfully obvious to me. "Right now, my division is trying to land a massive, game-changing partnership deal. We've been working on it for months. We're trying to get a meeting with the founder of this ridiculously successful fintech company, Quantum Solutions. Some reclusive genius out of Chicago. He's practically a ghost. Never does interviews." He laughed a short, sharp, self-important laugh. "A company, a world, you've probably never even heard of." He said it with such breathtaking, unthinking, glorious arrogance. Such complete, utter, perfect blindness. He had no idea. He thought he was delivering the final, crushing blow, the ultimate proof of the vast gulf between his world and mine. In reality, he had just handed me the sword, sharpened it for me, and told me exactly where to strike. I stopped walking. We were now just a few feet away from Victoria Chen's orbit. I slowly turned my head and looked at my brother. I looked at his expensive suit, his confident smirk, his pitying, condescending eyes, and I saw him for what he truly was. A man trapped in a small, gilded, self-satisfied cage, completely and utterly oblivious to the vast, complex, and powerful universe that existed just outside its bars. I gave him a look I had never given him before in my entire life. It was not a look of anger, or hurt, or submission. It was the flat, neutral, dispassionate, and slightly curious look a scientist gives a specimen under a microscope just before adding the chemical that will cause an irreversible reaction. "You're right, Alex," I said, my voice quiet and even, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. "I've probably never heard of it." Then, I turned my back on his confused, irritated face. I deliberately and pointedly shook his hand off my arm as if it were a piece of lint, a meaningless annoyance. And I took the final few steps toward Victoria Chun. I could feel his bewildered stare burning into my back. He still thought this was his party, his night, his victory. He was about to learn, in the most public and brutally efficient way possible, that he wasn't even the main character in his own story. I stepped directly into Victoria Chen's line of sight, my movement so deliberate that it momentarily broke her out of her corporate reverie. She looked up from her club soda, her expression shifting seamlessly into a polite, professional mask, the kind of vaguely pleasant look she probably reserved for enduring a few moments of awkward small talk with whatever local manager or ambitious underling was about to interrupt her solitude. I didn't give her a chance to deploy it. Before she could offer a polite hello, I extended my hand, my posture straight, my gaze direct and unwavering. My voice was different now. It had shed the hesitant, apologetic tones of Mark the brother. It was the clear, confident and resonant tone of Marcus the chairman. The voice I used in boardrooms in New York and London, not the one I used in my childhood home in Willow Creek. "Victoria," I said, my voice cutting cleanly and calmly through the party chatter. "It's good to see you again. Marcus Mitchell." The reaction was instantaneous, yet it unfolded in a series of fascinating, slow-motion stages, like a car crash scene from a dozen different angles. First, her polite, pre-programmed smile froze on her face. Her eyes, sharp and intensely analytical, flickered with a brief, dismissive confusion as she tried to place me. She was probably scrolling through a mental database of every mid-level manager she'd ever met at a corporate retreat. Then the name registered, Marcus Mitchell. I saw the file being pulled from a deep, important cabinet in her mind. Then her eyes met mine again and the connection was made. The face, the name, the context. The file was opened. Her jaw went slack. The elegant, long-stemmed glass she was holding tilted precariously in her hand. The club soda sloshing dangerously close to the rim. A wave of stunned, Unadulterated disbelief washed over her face, wiping away the years of media training and corporate composure in a single, shocking moment. Marcus Mitchell? She breathed, the name a question, a whisper of sheer impossibility. Then her eyes widened as the full, earth-shattering implication hit her. Chairman Mitchell? Of Quantum Solutions. She physically took a half-step back, a reflexive movement as if hit by a small, invisible shockwave. My God, what on earth are you doing here? The deference in her voice was absolute, the kind of respect reserved for royalty or a revered, mythical figure. Her entire demeanor had shifted from that of a superior addressing a subordinate to that of a peer, or even an admirer addressing a titan of industry. It was a transformation so sudden and so total that it created its own gravitational pull, silencing the conversations in our immediate vicinity. Behind me, I heard a sharp, strangled gasp. It was a sound of pure, animal panic. It was Alex. His world was imploding in real time. The sequence of words he'd just heard, Chairman Mitchell, Quantum Solutions, was a logic bomb that had just detonated in the center of his carefully constructed reality. His brain, which had so effortlessly and arrogantly categorized me as a failure for 2 decades, was now sputtering, smoking, frantically trying to solve an equation that had only one terrifying, impossible solution. Quantum Solutions? He stammered out, his voice a hoarse, cracking croak that was barely audible. He looked from me, his weirdo, basement-dwelling brother, to his own high-ranking, impeccably dressed corporate superior, who was now staring at me with something approaching reverence. The founder, the reclusive genius, the guy we've been trying to get a meeting with? His own boastful words from moments before were now a noose of his own making, tightening around his neck with every passing second. Victoria, her attention now fully and intensely focused on me, finally seemed to register Alex's panicked sputtering again. She turned to him, her expression one of utter, profound bewilderment. Alex, she said, her voice crisp and sharp with the unmistakable ring of authority. You know Chairman Mitchell? You have a personal, direct connection to the one man our CEO has been trying to get on the phone with for the better part of a year? The man whose platform our entire 5-year global growth strategy is contingent upon. The word chairman seemed to ricochet off the cheap, wood-paneled walls of the suddenly silent community center. The party was over. An inquest had begun. People were turning, craning their necks, their faces a gallery of confusion and dawning, hungry curiosity. They knew something significant, something seismic was happening. They just didn't know what yet. Jason Wilson, Alex's smug best friend and loyal sycophant, had been laughing loudly at some joke with a group of colleagues nearby. His laughter died in his throat, choked off as if by an invisible hand. His face, which had been ruddy with beer and self-satisfaction just moments before, turned a pasty, sickly shade of gray. I could almost see the Rolodex of his insults. Quantum thingy, crawling back home, basement workshop, scrolling through his mind's eye, followed by the terrifying, career-ending realization of who he had been saying them to. He's. Alex finally managed to force the words out of his paralyzed throat. They sounded like they were made of ground glass. He's my brother. If the room had been quiet before, it was now a vacuum, a black hole of sound. You could have heard a pin drop on the cheap, worn-out linoleum floor. Victoria Chen's perfectly composed, media-trained, corporate face broke completely. She stared at Alex as if he had just announced he was from Mars and spoke fluent Dolphin. Then her gaze snapped back to me, then back to Alex, her mind clearly struggling to reconcile 2 completely contradictory sets of data. He's your brother? She repeated, the words laced with an astonishment so profound it was almost comical. She shook her head, a small, involuntary movement, as she tried to recalibrate her entire understanding of the universe. The articles, the Forbes profile, they all just said Marcus Mitchell. They never mentioned a family. I never put it together. She looked at me again, her professional admiration overriding her shock. I have to tell you, Chairman, I'm one of the biggest admirers of your work. Your white papers on algorithmic risk assessment and quantum financial modeling are required reading for my entire department. What you've done, it's not just an improvement, it's a paradigm shift. It's the most significant leap in financial technology in a generation. Every word she spoke was another shovel of dirt on the grave of the person they all thought I was. I wasn't Mark the weirdo. I was Marcus the visionary. I wasn't Mark the failure. I was Marcus the paradigm shift. The whispers began to ripple outward from our little group, spreading through the stunned room like a virus. That's Alex's brother? Did she say chairman? What the hell is Quantum Solutions? Did she say Forbes? My mother, who had been watching the drama unfold from a distance, began to push her way through the now rapt and silent crowd, her face a storm of confusion and mounting, defensive panic. What is going on here? She demanded, her voice shrill and piercing. Victoria, what are you talking about? What is this nonsense? Victoria, still reeling but regaining her corporate composure, turned to face my mother. Her tone was now filled with a careful, almost chilly, deferential respect. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, and the formal address was a clear and brutal signal of the massive status shift that had just occurred in the room. Your son, Mark, she said, stumbling for a moment over the familiar, domestic name, is Marcus Mitchell, the founder and chairman of the board of Quantum Solutions. According to the last public valuation, his company is worth approximately $12 billion. She paused, letting the impossible, obscene number hang in the air, sucking all the remaining oxygen out of the room. Our parent corporation, she continued, her voice now as clear and precise as a surgeon's scalpel, made a formal, unsolicited offer to acquire his company last quarter. The offer was for $2 billion. In cash. He turned it down. $12 billion. $2 billion. Turned down. The numbers were alien. They were nonsensical. They didn't belong in this room, with its cheap decorations and its wilting snack platters and its petty, small-town judgments. My mother physically staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. It was not the horror of a threat, but the horror of a vast, catastrophic, and irreversible mistake. She looked at me, truly looked at me, and I could see her entire perception of her own life, of her own judgment, of her own role as a mother, crumbling into dust before my very eyes. Alex was a statue carved from ice. His face was bloodless. His mouth was hanging open, a slack, foolish O of disbelief. The celebratory banner behind him, the one bearing his name and his new, suddenly pathetic title, now looked like a cruel, ironic joke written by the gods of hubris. His night of triumph had become the stage for his own public execution, and he had been the one to load the gun, build the gallows, and kick the chair out from under himself. He had spent the entire evening, his entire life, mocking a man who he now understood could buy and sell his entire world with the stroke of a pen and not even notice the expense. The stunned, absolute silence in the room was finally broken, not by a gasp from a corporate executive or a sob from a family member, but by the quiet, emotional, and triumphant voice of Dr. Henry Simmons. He had pushed his way to the front of the circle that had now formed around us, his old eyes shining with an emotion that was pure and beautiful to behold. It was a mixture of pride, vindication, and the pure, unadulterated joy of a teacher seeing his student surpass his wildest dreams. He didn't care about the billions, the valuations, the corporate power plays. He pointed a trembling, age-spotted finger at me, but he wasn't accusing. He was connecting a dot, closing a circle that no one else in this room even knew existed. The computer lab, he said, his voice thick and cracking with emotion, yet it carried across the silent room. The new one, at the high school, it just appeared last year. Out of the blue. 30 brand new workstations, a new dedicated server, a fiber optic connection directly to the main trunk. It's better than the lab at the county college. He took a shaky breath. It was all paid for by an anonymous donation. It came through a tech education foundation. The letter that came with it was short and signed. It just said it was from a former student who believes in the future of Willow Creek and the transformative power of a good teacher. He looked directly at me then, tears welling in his kind old eyes, spilling unashamedly down his wrinkled cheeks. "That was you, wasn't it, son? That was you." I didn't say a word. I just gave him a small, slow, deliberate nod. "You told me to build the future, Dr. Simmons?" I said quietly. My voice meant for him, though everyone in the rapt room heard it. I just wanted to make sure the kids coming up behind me had the right tools and the right foundation to do it. A new wave of murmurs, of shocked whispers, rippled through the room. This was a different kind of shock, a different kind of revelation. The money, the billions, it was an abstract, unbelievable number, a piece of fantasy. But a new, state-of-the-art computer lab for the local high school? That was real. That was tangible. That was an act of quiet, hidden, profound generosity that stood in stark, brutal contrast to the loud, self-congratulatory, and ultimately hollow spectacle they had all been celebrating just an hour before. It painted a picture of a man who didn't need applause, who didn't crave the spotlight, who found value in giving back, not in showing off. My mother, her mind finally catching up to the new reality, lurched forward. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, almost frantic, as if I were a mirage she was trying to hold on to. "Mark," she whispered, her voice a desperate, pleading, broken hiss. "Mark, why didn't you ever tell us any of this? Why would you keep this from us?" I looked down at her hand, at her perfectly manicured nails and her expensive rings, clutching my simple cotton sleeve as if her life depended on it. Then I looked back up at her face, at the confusion and the dawning regret in her eyes. The cold, clear calm was still settled deep inside me. The years of anger and hurt had been burned away in the fire of the last 10 minutes, leaving behind only the sterile, immutable ash of truth. "I tried to," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, devoid of accusation. It was simply a statement of historical fact, a reading from a ledger. "I called you 7 years ago when I got my first round of funding. I was so excited I could barely speak. I told you the name of my company. You changed the subject to talk about Alex's promotion to associate manager." I saw a flicker of horrified recognition in her eyes. She remembered. She had buried the memory, but it was there. "I tried again," I continued, my gaze shifting from my mother to my brother, who looked like he was about to be physically sick all over his expensive Italian shoes. "I emailed you both a link to the first major article ever written about the company. Alex replied that it was too long, didn't read, and told me not to go bankrupt. I let the simple, unadorned truths hang in the air between us. I didn't need to embellish them. I didn't need to add any venom. Their own words, their own actions, their own choices were a more powerful and damning indictment than any angry speech I could ever make." I gently, but firmly, pried her fingers from my arm. Then I looked at my brother one last time. He was still frozen, a living statue of shattered arrogance and dawning shame. "You were right about one thing tonight, Alex," I said, my voice still quiet, yet it seemed to carry to every corner of the silent room. "You called me a nobody." I held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. "And you were right, because in this family, in this town, in your world, if your name isn't Alex Mitchell, you are a nobody." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't want one. I had no interest in witnessing the messy, self-serving, tearful apologies that were sure to follow. Their respect, now that it was finally, belatedly, offered, was worthless to me. It was a currency minted from shock and self-preservation, not from love or genuine understanding. It was fool's gold. I scanned the crowd and my eyes met Aunt Patricia's one last time. She was looking at me with a sad, proud, knowing smile. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of thanks and farewell. I did the same for Dr. Simmons, who was still wiping tears from his eyes with the back of his hand. They were my true family in that moment, the only ones who had seen the cathedral when it was still just a pile of bricks. Then I turned my back on the wreckage. I turned my back on my mother's stricken, horrified face and my brother's empty, shattered one. I walked through the parted crowd, a silent sea of stunned faces, and I didn't hurry. I just walked. I pushed open the double doors of the community center and stepped out into the cool, clean, blessedly quiet night air. The muffled sounds of the ruined party behind me were just noise, the last echoes of a world I no longer belonged to. The silence in my car on the long, dark drive back to Chicago wasn't lonely or empty. For the first time in a very long time, it was peaceful. It was the clean, quiet, and profound sound of freedom. The weeks following the party were a blur of productive, focused silence. I dove back into my work at Quantum Solutions with a renewed sense of purpose, finding a deep and abiding comfort in the clean, binary logic of code and the familiar, forward-moving rhythm of strategy meetings. The emotional chaos of Willow Creek felt like a distant, unpleasant dream, a badly written play I had finally walked out of. I didn't receive a single call, text, or email from my mother or my brother, and I made no effort to reach out myself. A chasm had opened between us that night, and I had no desire to be the one to build a bridge across it. For a bridge to be built, I realized the other side had to be willing to pick up a hammer and acknowledge that the chasm was of their own making. About 2 months later, a short, concise email appeared in my professional inbox, slipping past the filters of my assistant. It was from Aunt Patricia. Subject: Family Update. Mark, I know you may not want to hear this, and I'm not asking you to do anything. I just think you have a right to know. Alex resigned from Wilson Financial the Monday after the party. He hasn't left the house in weeks. Emma is worried sick, says he just sits in the living room staring at the wall. Your mother is calling me every day, crying, asking what she should do. There's a real mess here. Thinking of you. Love, Patricia. I read the email 3 times, letting the words sink in. A younger version of me, a more wounded version of me, might have felt a surge of triumphant, vindictive pleasure. Good, he would have thought. Let him see what it feels like. But I felt nothing of the sort. There was no joy in his downfall. There was just a quiet, somber, and deeply resonant sense of inevitability. Actions have consequences. It was the simplest, most fundamental algorithm in the universe. It was a lesson Alex, wrapped in a lifetime of unearned privilege and reflexive praise, had never been forced to learn. Until now, what I pieced together later, through subsequent reluctant conversations with my aunt, was the full, ugly extent of his unraveling. He hadn't been fired. He was too valuable for that, at least on paper. He had walked into his boss's office that Monday morning, his face pale and drawn, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a year, and had tendered his resignation, effective immediately. He couldn't face the whispers in the hallway. He couldn't face the pitying looks from his colleagues. He couldn't face the prospect of ever having to be in the same room as Victoria Chin again. His entire professional identity had been built on a fragile foundation of being the successful Mitchell brother, the charming, confident rising star. When that foundation was publicly dynamited in a single catastrophic night, the whole flimsy structure of his self-worth had come crashing down with it. He retreated into a deep, isolating depression. He and Emma had to pull out of the purchase of the bigger house, losing their deposit. He spent his days locked in their modest starter home, the one he was always complaining about, the one that was a constant, tangible reminder of his perceived station in life. Emma told my aunt that he would just sit in the darkened living room for hours on end, staring at a blank television screen, refusing to talk, refusing to eat. The golden boy, the hometown hero, the regional manager, had discovered that he was made of glass, and he had been comprehensively, irrevocably shattered. And then, slowly, painfully, after weeks of this self-imposed exile, he started to do the one thing he had never done in his life. He started to do his own research. He started looking for me. Not the caricature he had created in his mind. Not the nobody with a little startup. But the real me. He sat down at his laptop, the one he had previously used for managing his fantasy football team and browse for new luxury cars, and he typed Marcus Mitchell and Quantum Solutions into the search bar. The internet, which he had always used as a tool for distraction and entertainment, now became his classroom, his confessional, his crucible. He fell down a rabbit hole of my life's work, and the journey changed him. He read the Forbes profile that called me the ghost of Wall Street, an innovator who was notoriously private. He read the dense, technical articles in academic journals, and while he didn't understand the math, he understood the reverence in the tone of the authors. He found the Wall Street Journal piece on our last funding round, which detailed the aggressive 9-figure valuation. He watched grainy C-SPAN footage of me, looking young and nervous but speaking with a quiet authority, testifying before a congressional subcommittee on the future of financial regulations. He watched interviews I'd given to European tech blogs where I spoke passionately not about money, but about the democratization of financial data, about creating a more transparent and equitable system. He looked at photos of our company's global offices, sleek, modern, light-filled spaces in London, Tokyo, Singapore, and Berlin, filled with bright, smiling, diverse young people who looked genuinely happy to be there. He spent days, maybe even weeks, meticulously, obsessively piecing together the last 7 years of my life, the life he had so casually, so cruelly, so consistently dismissed. He was finally, for the very first time, reading the book of my life, and he was discovering that the brother he had called a nobody was, in fact, somebody. Somebody he didn't know at all. The realization didn't just humble him. It broke him. It stripped away the last calloused layers of his ego and left him staring into the ugly, warped reflection of his own jealousy, his own insecurity, his own profound and terrifying fear of being ordinary. One crisp Tuesday morning in my Chicago office, my executive assistant, Sarah, a woman who could handle hedge fund managers having tantrums and demanding billionaires without so much as flinching, buzzed my intercom. Her voice was unusually hesitant. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, a note of uncertainty in her usually unflappable tone. "I have a Mr. Alex Mitchell on line 3. He's asking if it would be possible to have 5 minutes of your time. He was very insistent. He said you would know why he's calling." I stared at the blinking light on my phone, my heart giving a sudden, hard thud against my ribs. My first instinct was to tell her I was in a meeting for the rest of the decade. My second was to pick up the phone and unleash a torrent of all the righteous anger I'd suppressed for years. But I did neither. Instead, to my own surprise, I felt a strange, detached, almost clinical curiosity. What could he possibly want? After everything, what could he possibly have to say? "It's fine, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "Put him through." A moment later, a voice came through the speaker. It was so small, so hesitant, so stripped of its usual booming confidence that for a second, I honestly didn't recognize it. It was the voice of a ghost. "Mark?" he asked. The single word was freighted with a universe of unspoken history. "I'm here, Alex," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint, ragged sound of his breathing, an unsteady rhythm of fear and resolve. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I'm sorry," he finally choked out, the words sounding like they were physically painful for him to form, like they were being torn from his throat. "God, Mark, I am so sorry." I remained silent, letting his apology hang in the air between us, a fragile, weightless thing. "I was wrong," he continued, his voice cracking now, surrendering completely to the emotion he had suppressed for a lifetime. "I was wrong about everything. My whole life. I thought I was the winner because I was on the safe track. The one everyone understood, the one everyone approved of. And I hated you for not being on it with me. I hated you because you were brave. You were brave enough to go your own way, and I was a coward. I was so terrified of failing that I needed you to fail. I needed it." His voice dropped to a raw, ragged whisper, the sound of a confession being torn from the deepest part of his soul. "Every joke, every put down, every time I ignored you or made fun of you, it was never about you. It was about me. It was about making myself feel bigger because, deep down, I felt so damn small. It was because I was jealous. It's that simple. I was jealous of you then, and God help me, I'm jealous of you now." It was the most honest, self-aware, and devastatingly true thing I had ever heard him say. He wasn't making excuses. He was offering a diagnosis of his own poisoned soul. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice barely audible now, thick with tears. I know I don't deserve it, and I'm not calling to ask for anything. Not a job, not money, not a damn thing. I had to say it. You deserved to hear it. For years, you deserved a better brother than me. He was openly crying now, the sound raw and unrestrained, the sound of a man completely broken. The golden boy was weeping over a static-filled phone line, stripped bare of all his defenses, all his arrogance, all his pride. And in that moment, the ice that had encased my heart for so long, the hard, protective shell I had built around myself to survive my own family, finally began to crack. It didn't melt away, not entirely, but a small fissure appeared. Tiny, fragile opening. Where are you now, Alex? I asked, my own voice softer, more human than I had intended it to be. I'm still here, he said between sobs. In Willow Creek, trying to figure out who the hell I am, now that I'm not the successful one anymore. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, Alex, thank you for the call. I gently disconnected and leaned back in my chair. I stared out the panoramic window of my office, looking down at the intricate, pulsing grid of the Chicago streets below, a world I had built for myself. The bridge between my brother and me was still in ruins, but he had just, with trembling, bleeding hands, laid the first solid foundation stone. And for the first time in my life, I thought that maybe, just maybe, it was a bridge worth trying to rebuild. The next 6 months were a slow, awkward, and surprisingly gentle dance of reconnection. Alex and I spoke on the phone every few weeks. The conversations were stilted at first, two strangers trying to learn a new language, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared and painful past. He told me he was in therapy, something I never would have imagined in a million years. He had taken a humbling job at a local logistics company, managing warehouse inventories on the night shift. It was honest work, he said, and for the first time he felt like he was earning his paycheck, not just collecting it. He was slowly, painfully becoming a different person. My mother also called, offering a long, tearful, rambling apology that was more about absolving her own guilt than understanding my pain. But it was a start. A flawed, imperfect start. During this time, I was finalizing the plans for an ambitious new division at Quantum Solutions. We were creating a specialized team to act as a liaison, a translator, between our disruptive, cutting-edge technology and the traditional, old-school financial institutions we were trying to partner with. We needed people who could speak their language, who understood their cautious, skeptical, and often archaic culture. We needed to bridge the gap between our world and theirs. One Thursday afternoon, I looked at the org chart for the new division, at an empty box near the bottom, and I picked up the phone. I called Alex. I got straight to the point, no sentimentality. I have a potential opportunity, I said, my tone all business. It's a junior project coordinator position on a new team we're building. The work is based out of our new office in Philadelphia. It's not a management role. It's an entry-level spot. You'd be starting from the absolute bottom. You'd be fetching coffee. You'd have to prove yourself to me and to everyone else, every single day, from scratch. There are no special favors and no guarantees. Your last name won't help you here. In fact, it will probably hurt you. There was a long, charged silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him processing the offer, weighing the profound demotion against the fragile sliver of opportunity. Yes, he finally said. His voice was quiet, but steady and firm. There was no hesitation. Okay, yes, I'll take it. That was a year ago. Today, as I'm telling you this story, Alex and Emma live in a small, rented 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Philadelphia. Alex is still with Quantum Solutions. He's still a junior project coordinator. But he's the best damn junior project coordinator we have. He's the first one in the office and the last one to leave. He's punctual, meticulous, and has developed a surprising knack for calming down difficult, egotistical clients, perhaps because he now recognizes their brand of insecurity so well. He has earned the grudging and now genuine respect of his colleagues, not because he's the chairman's brother. A fact that I have made sure most of them don't even know, but because he shows up, keeps his head down, and does exceptional, thankless work. We aren't the close, backslapping brothers you see in movies. We may never be. The scars of the past run too deep for that. But the toxic rivalry, the corrosive jealousy, is gone, replaced by something new, something quieter. A fragile, hard-won, and deeply professional respect. Just last week, we were on a tense, late-night video call with a major banking consortium in Germany. The client was being difficult, threatening to pull out of a 9-figure deal over a minor technicality. Alex, who was just supposed to be taking notes and managing the schedule, calmly and respectfully interjected. He laid out a simple, elegant 3-point compromise with a logic and clarity that took everyone on the call, including me, by surprise. He didn't just save the deal, he made it stronger. After the German bankers had signed off, their mood considerably lighter, it was just the two of us left on the call, our faces illuminated by the bluish glow of our respective screens, 1,000 miles apart. "Good work today, Alex," I said. It wasn't a compliment from a brother. It was a simple, honest acknowledgement of a job well done from a CEO to his employee. I could see him on my screen. He looked up, tired but satisfied. A small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time that day. "Thanks, Mark," he said. It was a simple exchange. Two colleagues at the end of a long, hard day. But in those 4 words, there was more honesty, more truth, and more mutual respect than we had shared in the previous 20 years combined. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single event you arrive at. It's a process. It's a choice you make every day. It isn't about forgetting the past or pretending the wounds aren't there. It's about building something new on top of the ruins, something stronger. Our new relationship isn't built on the shifting sands of family obligation or shared memories. It's being built, brick by painful, deliberate brick, on the solid ground of earned respect. It's not perfect, but it's real. And for now, that's more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know you best? Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.